I'm Sean Fennessey, and this is The Big Picture, a conversation show about the waning days of the movie year. Nickel Boys is expanding over the holidays, and next week we have a few more major releases, including Nosferatu, The Brutalist, The Complete Unknown, and Babygirl among them, making their way into theaters. The very end of this sometimes dicey movie year is ending on kind of a strange note. It's high, but it's awkward. The last couple weeks have been rocky. My original plan on today's episode was to get into Kraven the Hunter, Mufasa the Lion King, and maybe even Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim, the new animated Tolkien movie. And while I pride myself on spending time on major releases from the studios, especially when legitimate filmmakers whose work I have loved in the past, like J.C. Shandor or Barry Jenkins, are involved, I'm not going to devote too much time to these movies today. I didn't really connect with these movies, and in the case of Kraven, I couldn't even really feel Shandor's point of view at all in the movie. Mufasa is more of an assignment for Jenkins, and while I was fascinated watching him integrate his deep focus close-ups and panoramic visual style applied to digitally created lions, the movie is another in a long line of genuinely mystifying live-action Disney movies. I've seen almost all of them now, given my daughter's growing interest, and as a huge fan of classic Disney animation, it's diminishing returns on almost every one. I've seen 16 of the 21, and really none of them are good at all. As for Kraven, well, there's a hilarious episode of the Ringerverse with both the House of R and Midnight Boys crew weighing in on the movie, and the end of Sony's extended Spider-Man universe, so tap into that if you want to hear a little bit more about it. Instead of exploring these IP extensions, let's talk about the winners and losers of the year in movies. Has 2024 been a good movie year? We've been debating it a lot in the past couple of months on the show. Every year has good films. You already know what my favorites are if you've been listening. A couple even transcend the typically entertaining or distracting variety. This hasn't been my favorite year, but there's been some special work. But in addition to whether or not this has been a good movie year, has it been a good year for movies is the big question I want to talk about right now. The case for yes. 2025 is nearly here, and we survived, maybe even thrived, considering the circumstance. In the aftermath of the dual strikes, the box office has dipped just 10% year over year and could get closer to 5% or even 3% when it's all said and done this holiday season. Given the panic that set in back in May after Furiosa and The Fall Guy underperformed, and the unusual number of empty opening weekends at the movies this year, things could have gotten really bad. But then they didn't. Longlegs surprised, Wicked soared, Inside Out 2 exploded, Civil War made money, The Beekeeper made money. Movies are back. They're back. Well, maybe they're not back or they are. I'm not sure. The case for no is this. The movies that performed well up and down the box office are a little dispiriting for cinephiles. Of the top 20 highest grossing US movies of 2024, only 3 are non-sequels or prequels. Those are It Ends With Us, The Wild Robot, and If. Compare that to 7 of those originals in 2023, including the Barbenheimer Behemoth. This year, 7 of the highest grossers are at least the 4th installment in a franchise. And so while the box office performance has been surprisingly sturdy, there's something insidious in the stew. Movie franchises seem to be tanking on TV, but they're hanging in there at the movies at the expense of other kinds of movies, leaving streamers to pick up the slack with stuff like Rebel Ridge, Carry On, and It's What's Inside on Netflix. Rock-solid genre movies that we like to celebrate here, but they're not playing in theaters. So yeah, as always, I'm back. Movies are back, but at any minute, it could be so over. We'll see what happens. That does take us to 2025, though, and arguably the most important movie of that year, which is Superman. We just saw the first trailer for Superman, and I will say I am excited. I am a James Gunn fan, as listeners of the show know, and I like what I saw from the trailer. I liked the color grading. I liked how bright and beautiful and visibly and smartly lit the movie seems to be. Obviously, Gunn has a very spongy and visceral quality to his filmmaking. It's not a mistake that the first image you see of Superman in this teaser trailer is a bloodied Superman. James Gunn likes blood and guts. This is something that is featured in all of his movies. So while there is a kind of classic feeling and the interpolation of the John Williams theme from the Richard Donner Superman film, I get the feeling like this is going to be a very Gunn-type project, aside from those obvious nods to the past. Also, David Corenswet looks great. He is not hyper muscle-bound like Henry Cavill was in the Zack Snyder films. Rachel Brosnahan looks like a perfect Lois Lane. I'm excited. I choose to believe. I've believed in Gunn in the past, and it has paid off for me. In the meantime, let's go back to 2024. Let's bring in Joanna Robinson. She's going to help me talk about the winners and losers of the movie year, and also talk about some best picture contenders and how they stack up as we head towards 2025. Okay, Joanna Robinson's here. Joe, thank you for being here. We have a lot to get to.
I'm sorry I missed your monologue, but I'm glad to be here for the rest.
Don't mock my monologue, all right? I need you to support me.
I support you. I'm so supportive of you and your art.
My art, huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
As I Laszlo Toth my way through movie podcasting, one brutal episode at a time.
You're a misunderstood genius in your time, and eventually we will celebrate you.
I know that's not true. I wanted to ask you very quickly, I'm sure you're making all manner of content about it, but I just shared a couple of thoughts about the Superman trailer. As we look forward before looking back at 2024, what was your vibe?
First let me ask you, are you all in on this?
I am. I think if I didn't know anything about James Gunn's work, I would have some concerns. But
that's so interesting. I feel the opposite.
Oh, interesting. Why?
Well, here's what I'll say. It was a great trailer, like a great, vibes trailer. As you know, given many conversations we've had over the past few weeks, I'm a big Nick Holt fan. Mm-hmm. So seeing Nick Holt as Lex Luthor was wonderful. I thought he was kind of stole the trailer for me. But I have some questions, comments, and concerns about James Gunn as the right match for Superman, tonally. So I am reserving. I'm more skeptical than my fellow Ringerverse family, and they're all in and they're very excited. And there was a thing with the dog, and that really thrilled them, and they love that. I will say, and I said this to Mal. We talked about it briefly on House of R, and I said the shot of Superman in the snow, beaten and bloody, and sort of unable to catch his breath, I thought was very effective in a way that the sort of brooding, gritty Zack Snyder Superman stuff never was effective for me. This was like a wounded hero, but it didn't feel like it was trying to be grimdark at the same time. And then the bit with the kid and the flag, the Superman flag with the Superman logo on it, I thought that was really, really good as well. That's where I am.
Yeah, I think deep down, James Gunn is kind of a sap, so I think that this is going to work out fine personally, but
maybe he's just his whole brand is snark, and
yeah, but it's also if we work together, we can be a family, and if we are decent to each other, we can survive the struggle. Like that's the Guardians movies are all about that. Even the Suicide Squad movie is kind of about that. So I agree with you on the bloodied part. I mean, that's the other thing is that he's just such a visceral filmmaker, and he has roots in exploitation and horror. And so a bloodied Superman is an important issue. Yeah, it's an important vision for that character.
The stuff with Hawk Girl, Nathan Fillion in a wig, I have some questions about all of that. Rachel Brosnahan in a vest, I have no questions. No notes, looks great.
It was an inspired casting, and she looks like a perfect Lois Lane.
She's perfect.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing a few morsels there. I'm sure you're
welcome.
Getting into it even deeper in other spaces.
I'm guessing you didn't expect that I would be the more cynical between the two of us about a Superman trailer, but
Yeah, I think where you're coming from is reasonable. And it's possible that that's the case. I think I want to believe, I think I want to believe in a little bit more of a standalone, optimistic superhero story that feels outside of where we've been for the last 10 years.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot about Gunn's plans at the plan that he laid out for the films that he wants to make, and the way they are not all necessarily burdensomely leading towards a team up is very exciting to me. I was just, as he was sort of assigning films, I was like, oh, you gave yourself Superman? I would have given you a different one. And that's the question I have. But I'm happy to be proven wrong in 2025. I'm often wrong, so we shall see. Not about anything I'm going to predict today. Everything I predict today is going to be bang on correct.
We'll see about that. The one last thing, I was never a DC guy growing up. I was always more of a Marvel kid. But there were a handful of characters that I found interesting. In particular, I always thought Clayface was really cool, especially in Batman the Animated Series. Yeah. So the idea of James Gunn doing a Clayface movie written by Mike Flanagan and a Sergeant Rock movie directed by Luca Guadagnino written by Justin Kuritzkis, I'm like, that's what I want superhero executives to be doing. That's super cool. Those movies might not work, but at least try that and try to expand beyond what we've understood for the last 20 years.
I think their Batman pitch is really good. The prospect of a Swamp Thing property is really exciting to me. Yeah, there's a lot that's coming out of there that is very exciting. This was my one question mark, but everyone else seems really high on it and really excited. So I'm probably wrong about it.
Okay, well, we can't be wrong about the winners and losers of the year in movies. So
No.
let's go through some. I kind of threw this at you last minute, but it feels appropriate because it felt like such a tense movie year coming out of the strikes. There was a lot of concern, a lot of trolling about the box office, I would say a lot of trade reporters. I think in an attempt to bring some drama to this entertainment year, suggested that the sky was falling. When I did my little riff in May, my intention of that was actually not be doing Sky is Falling. My intention was to say, like, just let's put our head down and keep going to the movies, and this is going to work out.
Right.
Do you think that it did work out? Like, are you set aside whether or not the movies were good or not? In general, the state of the business, you think it's healthy, in bad shape, somewhere in between?
Before we started recording, we were talking about, like, just turn your brain off, go to the movies, have a great time.
Check out The Brutalist and Emilia Perez. Don't think about the themes or the ideas.
Conclave, what a sick movie. I think this was actually, like, looking at what feels like it rose above in terms of stickiness and cultural conversation. This is a pretty tough year, I think, at the end of the day. Like, there's some things at the top that I'm excited are there. Like, Dune 2, I think, is a really worthy, exciting film that captivated people and made a lot of money. Definitely there were some huge box office hits that existed this year. You can't say that nobody went to the cinema. They certainly went, but they went for stuff like Deadpool and Wolverine, which I don't think either of us would say is like a cinematic classic. So looking at the offerings at the end of this year, I think it was like a pretty tough year. You said to not talk about the quality of the movies, but I think quality wise, I think it was a tough year. But I don't think we can say, let's board up all the movie theaters. It's over. We did it. I think that's still alive and well. And I think as we rebound from the long ripple of COVID and the writer's strike and all of that, I think 2025, Chris and I were having a similar conversation about television this year. I just really think we're in a lag year because of a lot of circumstances. And I think what's on the slate for 2025 is quite exciting.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think there are a handful of movies that I was genuinely awestruck by, but not very many. And the franchise stuff seemed very weak. Obviously, a lot of the big franchises are also in a bit of a reset phase. Marvel and Jurassic Park and the Fast movies and a lot of stuff that is kind of consistently there took a pause to reset. Obviously I think that it's safe to say that the biggest winner of the movie year is Ryan Reynolds. And that win is twofold. One, at a time when the superhero industrial complex seemed to be at a pretty significant downturn.
Yeah.
He engineered, starred in, produced a $1 billion movie. That movie is basically a Mad TV sketch, but it's a pretty funny Mad TV sketch. And between that and his wife, Blake Lively, starring in producing It Ends With Us, which is arguably the biggest box office surprise of the year. Though maybe for non-Colleen Hoover knowers, that's true. I don't know.
I thought that movie didn't do nearly what they wanted it to.
Is that
Not
true?
Not necessarily in terms of like box office, but in terms of like impact. I thought, like, well, first of all, just to get my sort of like celebrity gossip angle in, I will say that was a disastrous press tour for that film. It made money, certainly, but my belief was that Blake Lively thought this was going to be like a Golden Globe winner, like, just a sort of glossier thing than it wound up being at the end of the day. And I think they really whiffed the marketing on it. The quality of the movie aside, they whiffed the marketing on it. They whiffed that whole launch in a way that, like, was interesting, because I think it actually underlines your point about what Ryan Reynolds did with Deadpool. Is like, he did that. They kind of tried to half Barbenheimer it, because Deadpool and Wolverine came out and then It Ends With Us came out a week or two later. And, Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds were showing up to the various premieres of It Ends With Us to sort of say, let's keep the party going. But the content of that film, which is about domestic violence, was just really not the match made in heaven that Barbenheimer proved to be. And so it felt like that was a failure to replicate what worked so well with Deadpool and Wolverine, but maybe not a financial failure. So maybe I'm sort of overstating the impact of that.
It's clear that the movie, I just found the movie to be not very good.
No.
And it feels very ham-handed in its storytelling about a sensitive issue. My
Yes.
big concerns were, I think I was expecting a completely different kind of movie. So when I sat down, I was quite flummoxed by what it turned out to be. But most people who sat down had read the book or were interested in the story and had some sense of what it was going to be. And I think people liked it well enough, but not even close to being what you're describing, which is like a potential awards contender or springboard for some sort of elevation of Blake Lively's status as a movie star.
Yeah.
But the movie made $350 million internationally, and it's a literary adaptation. I mean, that's, in these times, that is very rare. And
it is. Colleen Hoover is like a juggernaut in publishing right now. She is unstoppable. And so that sort of like IP that comes with her was a massive boost. It's, it's similar to launching the 50 Shades franchise or something like that. It's not just like a literary adaptation. It is a genuine phenomenon brought to the screen. And I think you're right that, like, of course, I can't argue against $350 million, but looking at sort of, I don't know if this is fair, letterbox scores or other things like that, it's getting really panned. And so I don't think it's something that began something. It was successful, but not something that when you take it around to people to say, here's what we do next, they're going to say, yes, more of that necessarily.
That's it. I wonder. I'm not sure. I mean, I think it
right.
may have accomplished what Blake Lively needed it to, even though the gossip around the movie was very not good. And I would argue not good for Blake Lively in particular.
Correct.
But I'm not sure. We'll have to basically wait until she makes another one of these films in the Hoover series or does something else new. I guess she's doing a Simple Favor. Is that what it's called? Simple Favor 2?
2, yeah. More menswear. We can only hope.
Which, that in and of itself was kind of a hit.
Yeah.
The original.
No, I mean, I anticipate we will get more Colleen Hoover. Whether or not that means we'll get more Blake Lively plus Colleen Hoover, I don't know.
Okay.
So I think it was a win for Colleen Hoover film adaptation or TV adaptation more than anything else. And I personally, this is my personal nemesis, is the Hooververse. I'm just like really out on it. So we'll see.
I only put that It Ends With Us in that conversation because it's been reported that Ryan Reynolds did a bit of a ghostwrite on the It Ends With Us script. And so he really had his fingers in two of the genuine box office successes of 2024.
That was such a weird moment where she's just started saying that on red carpets. And Justin Baldoni, who's the writer and director, was sort of like, oh, okay. She was just basically like trying to give Ryan credit for, I don't know, ghostwriting the film. Anyway, bizarre moment in celebrity culture. But definitely, inarguably, the Reynolds touch this year was very important. And I'm sure that Marvel is saying, whatever you want, sir, you can do with us. Which is just a wild power imbalance. I mean, like, Downey obviously had a strong grip over the Marvel apparatus, but they were never as desperate as they are right now. They were never such a weak moment as they are right now. So yeah,
I'm not sure if that's going to pay off long term. We shall see. The people do love them some Ryan Reynolds. I don't know. I don't even know what to say anymore.
Pay off in what way?
Deadpool will obviously find his way into whatever these Secret War stories they tell are.
Right.
That is smart. Whether like a Deadpool 4 movie could ever do what Deadpool and Wolverine does, I don't know. But then again, why would I bet against him? And I should just stop talking about it because like people loved this movie. They fucking loved it.
They did.
Did you have a backup for Power Couple if it's not Reynolds and Blake Lively?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo. Like, similarly, the whole Wicked phenomenon is what it is because the movie, as much as you and I both agree on it visually, is better than I expected it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I was really dreading this film, and I think they did a lot of things that I didn't expect them to do. But the power of the Ariana Grande, Cynthia Erivo story, maybe more Ariana Grande story, because Ariana Grande is like, here I am, I'm an actress, take me, cast me in things. Cynthia Erivo is, here I am, a stage actress, cast me in more of your films, that would be great. But their press tour, again, this is a film podcast, I don't mean to make it all about the celebrity stuff, but their press tour, as ridiculed as it was then turned around to become this great triumphant story. It was like an odd moment. Everyone was mocking it, then they saw the movie, and then they said, wow, look at what these women did, and look how important their friendship is, and look how strong their brand is.
That's definitely what I said. Absolutely.
Oh, well, yeah, you're known for that. You love to talk about people as brands. So, I know that about you.
Obviously, they have just been tremendously successful with selling this movie to the world. And really, the only review that matters in my life will be coming in this weekend because I have obtained a screener to Wicked and will be watching it in my home with my 3-year-old. And this morning, she demanded to see the trailer and said, I need to see the trailer for the movie where Elphaba is good. So I'll let you know next week.
Do you think it's going to... So you guys have been listening to the soundtrack in your home, right?
Yes.
Didn't you say that?
And we've pivoted to the movie soundtrack now, too.
Okay. Do you feel like if your daughter loves this movie, will it change your opinion of the movie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just I'm just in the bag for my kid. I'm just I loved the movie Wish because she loved it. And Wish is widely considered one of the worst Disney animated features of all time. And I was like, pretty good. I like the songs. Yeah. I'm interested. I saw Moana 2 and I didn't like it. And then I went to go see it with her and I was just bumping the soundtrack, driving her to school this morning. And then on the way home, I was like, I'm going to keep that song going in the car after I left school. It's a disease what happens when you get interested in stuff with your kids. It's great.
Okay, so Universal Pictures, if you want Sean to be pushing Wicked in the Best Picture category, send a box of goodies to his house. You know where to find his child, the most influential presence in the awards race this year.
Yeah. Apologies to all the pundits out there, but Alice is the strongest voice.
She is.
I guess that does dovetail with the Studio of the Year conversation. You suggested when we first started talking about this that Universal has a really strong case. I think Disney also has a really strong case for which is the biggest. The hierarchy has been pretty consistent over the last 5 years. It's more or less been Universal and Disney going back and forth with WB, Sony, and Paramount picking up the slack.
Yeah.
There was obviously the Barbie phenomenon boosted Warner Brothers last year, but these are really the two major theatrical movie studios. It also feels like while Universal has been persistently very theatrical forward, Disney is now fully back to being theatrical forward. Moana 2 being the clearest sign yet that there's so much money in those hills, those exhibition hills for them. And, for us, for the purposes of this show, I think that's wonderful. I do think that Universal probably had a slightly bigger challenge with getting Wicked right. And along with a handful of other films, The Wild Robot is a good example of a movie that they got that right. And it did pretty good business and will probably...
The Substance?
But do they really get to benefit from that? Because they pawned it off on Mubi. They backed it, but then they don't really get to claim it.
They do get to claim it, though. It's still in their stable, along with Twisters and Nosferatu and the Bike Riders and my fave, The Fall Guy. This was a really good year for them, and targeting different demographics too. You know what I mean? In a way that I don't think Disney is as expansive in their demo.
I agree with you. I mean, Universal already, I think, generally has the best reputation of the major studios for being simultaneously very filmmaker friendly and very audience friendly, right? This is the studio that signed up Christopher Nolan after the WB fallout. They signed up Jordan Peele. They signed up Daniels after Everything Everywhere All at Once. They're trying to bring in as many people into the fold that are creative and interesting. And they're also making Wicked and they're also making Twisters, So they have a claim. That being said, Disney has Deadpool and Wolverine and Inside Out 2 and now Moana 2. And those are going to end up being the 3 biggest movies of the year. So... how can you compete with that?
Well, what do you, okay, when you say biggest, are you just talking about box office?
Interesting question. I don't know. How do you think we should measure it?
Okay, so I will say that over on this other Ringer podcast I do, Trial by Content, we've been tinkering over the years with this sort of algorithm to try to capture what is the biggest, this Q score for the biggest movie of the year. Mm-hmm. Because it can't just be box office, because terrible movies make tons of money and no one ever talks about them again. And that happens all the time.
It's very true.
So it's so what is your Top Gun Maverick? What is your Barbenheimer? What is your the movie of the year? And it has there's, again, Letterbox is its own thing because that's a different audience, that is making their voice known.
Yes, my brutal boys and girls. God bless all of them.
There you go. The Babylon Hive continues, right? And then there's box office budget multiplier is one that we've been adding to the algorithm, just sort of
Good idea.
how profitable was this at the end of the day. There's not just the Letterboxd score, but there's how many people logged in on Letterboxd is a metric that we're tracking. Metacritic score. Just trying to, and I really think we got it right this year. I think it was a little janky last year. The Eras Tour movie came in at the end of the year like a wrecking ball and really destroyed everything. But I think this year we really got it. Do you want to hear our top 10?
I do.
Box office in addition to other things.
Absolutely.
So number 1, Doom Part 2.
Okay.
Number 2, Inside Out 2. Number 3, The Wild Robot. Number 4, Wicked. Number 5, Deadpool and Wolverine. Number 6, Challengers. Number 7, stay with me. Number 7, Long Legs. Number 8, The Substance. Number 9, Furiosa. Number 10, Alien Romulus. For stuff like Challengers and Long Legs and The Substance, I feel like these are films that are just going to stay alive in the conversation for years and years and years to come. Because when you talk to people who love cinema, they're going to say, have you seen The Substance this year? Did you watch Challengers? Whether or not those performed at the box office multiplier obviously helps something like Long Legs, but I think there's just an interesting maelstrom that we need to consider that goes beyond what the box office can tell us these days, because the box office is so different. That is just I saw there was something so big in this movie. I felt like I had to see it on the screen. And I don't know that people feel that way about the sexy tennis that is Challengers. I had to go to the cinema to see it. But if they see it at home, it's going to linger with them. That's my argument.
I love that you've put so much thought into the methodology. That's exactly the kind of dumb shit that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
I don't know that I haven't looked at the numbers that you've collated, but I'm not sure if I fully agree with where you landed. In part because I think Deadpool and Wolverine being the second highest grossing movie of the year, and also being a movie that essentially kept the seat warm for an entire wing of Hollywood, is not measurable, but incredibly important. And I think
That's
really
true.
Undermined a lot of my suspicions about where culture was. It's incredible success. Because on the episode that we did with the Midnight Boys about it, I was like, is this what people want? I remember asking that question because as I sat in the movie theater, I laughed. I got all the references. I was happy to have been on the journey with 20th Century Fox's superhero stories and all of the unmade movies. And it was great to see Gambit. And, against my own sincere will, I laughed at Ryan Reynolds. But I was like, God, this is so up its own ass. I can't believe it. And it still was monumentally big. I mean, it's basically an old school box office success. It's a movie, it's a remnant of 2018 and not of 2024. So I see a movie like that as being pretty significant in this measurement that we're having here.
It was always going to be, though, when people were sort of spinning their webs about this is the end of Marvel last year. Those of us who might have been on a Marvel-based book tour were saying they have one movie coming out next year, one movie, and it's Deadpool and Wolverine, and it's going to make an obscene amount of money, and it's going to give them the space they need to lick their wounds and figure out where to go from there. I think the writing on the wall for this has been happening since Spider-Man No Way Home. That was a similar sort of nostalgia play that worked way more than I even expected it would. And so there's this in the, I don't know, superhero pause or dying gasp, however you prefer to call it. There is this clutching at nostalgia straws, which is why Downey and Chris Evans are coming back to the MCU. That is the space we're in, at least in that avenue of storytelling.
I was just on a text chain with friends last night about the Chris Evans coming back thing, and we discussed it when you and I talked about Red One, but what a disappointment that
Yeah.
he just has done absolutely nothing with his Marvel capital and is now just going back after making 3 horrible streaming movies. It's a real drag, especially relative to what Sebastian Stan is doing, where he's just like,
Exactly.
absolutely, I'll go work with a Romanian auteur and try to elevate his work internationally. It's like, it's just it sucks.
We talked about exactly this, and I, as much as I hate that for Chris Evans, and what's even more disappointing is that he can do. We saw Knives Out. He can do it. There are things that he can do. He just doesn't have the taste or the advice that Sebastian Stan is getting.
Yeah, but he does have the taste. He made Snowpiercer. He made Sunshine. He made Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Like, he knows who good filmmakers are. He proved to us that. So I'm a little. It's more like he doesn't care, which is obviously his right as a person. But
that's depressing.
That's depressing. Anyway,
that's depressing.
We don't have to spend any more time on Chris Evans. I tell you what, I love your case for Universal. The fact that they spoke to a lot of different kinds of audiences in an effective way. So let's go with Universal as the studio. Let's talk about the movie star. Now, I was chatting with our friend Craig Horlbeck this morning about this, and he had a great comp that may be completely baffling to you, but I'm going to make an attempt to explain it.
Okay.
There's a famous football clip from the last couple of years in which Buda Baker intercepts a pass. He's a safety for the Arizona Cardinals, and he's running to bring that interception into the end zone for a touchdown. And while he's running, he doesn't realize that the wide receiver DK Metcalf is on his tail and is about to knock the ball out, forcing a fumble and halting that interception touchdown. That is what Timothée Chalamet is doing in Glenn Powell in the Movie Star of the Year race, where Glenn Powell, up until about 3 weeks ago, I was like, well, this is the story. Huge streaming hit in Hitman that's going to get him a Golden Globe nomination. Plus, Twister's cherry on top. This is a box office star. This is a guy who can carry a franchise. Everything that we've been saying on the show for the last 5 years, but everything that's been kind of in the ether of Hollywood for the last 5 years with Glenn, it happened. Anyone But You carried over from last year. He's the guy. He's our pick. And then Chalamet showed up on game day, College Game Day. And I was like, holy shit, A Complete Unknown is going to be a big hit. On top of that Dune Part 2, phenomenon that you were citing earlier. And so my gut is like, wow, he DK Metcalf the button on Glenn. That's right? Does it feel that way?
Absolutely. I mean, like, you put a bunch of these sort of like ideas in the doc, and I was trying to find alts for you just to keep like the conversation interesting, and I could not make a good case for anyone else other than Timmy as the Movie Star of the Year. The bookend of Dune Part 2 and A Complete Unknown. Again, the slightly different demographics they're serving in terms of Dune Part 2 obviously is in the Oscar conversation, but not the way in which A Complete Unknown has put him in the Best Actor conversation.
He could totally win, Joe.
He could absolutely win. And I think he might. And so, and we liked the movie, and we liked him, and more than anything else, we liked him in the movie. So there's all of that. And then there's like the lingering fumes of one of our favorite conversations from last year, which is like, somehow Wonka worked.
I know.
And so Timmy at this point feels undeniable, which is exciting because, in the age of is the movie star dead, this young crop coming up of like your Zendayas, your Timothée Chalamets, your Florence Pugh's, your entire cast of Dune Part 2, let's say, like that they can actually have movie stardom, not sort of the faint echo of movie stardom past, is exciting. And it's only good for, the conversation about the impact of movies in general.
I would argue too that he is doing it in a way that perhaps no one has ever done it before, because he's got a big challenge, right? You can't become a movie star now just on the back of exciting action or drama features the way that Paul Newman did, or Harrison Ford did, or Tom Cruise did, or Denzel Washington did. Obviously Hollywood is in a significantly different state. You need to use franchises to elevate. And so he has very deftly chosen franchises. He's aligned himself with a couple of filmmakers, and he's also taken traditional risks in terms of, relatively big budget dramas. So if you look at like the full scale of his career, 2 movies with Greta Gerwig, you've got obviously the 2 Dune films with Villeneuve. You've got a Bob Dylan portrayal with James Mangold, all celebrated directors. You've got Wonka with another celebrated director in Paul King, but a much like playing to kids, not playing to adults, totally different. You've also got like even this, you're obviously Luca Guadagnino and Call Me By Your Name and getting an Academy Award nomination at an incredibly young age. Even the stuff that doesn't work, like Beautiful Boy, I thought was like the right try, the right attempt. Bones and All is like the right thing to try to have a well-rounded CV as a young actor. And so
being someone that Wes Anderson calls, you know.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
And you know, now is obviously working with Josh Safdie, who he's wanted to work with for a long time. He's known those guys forever. That's a cool A24 period piece. That's also it's a different card in the deck. And so now it's like you look at the arc of his career and it's like he's not Leo, he's not Brad Pitt, he's not George Clooney, he's not like there's no 90s or 2000s archetype that he is really following. He's doing a little Daniel Day-Lewis. He's doing a little like I don't know who's a young heartthrob. Like he's doing a little Christian Bale. He's kind of moving all over the place in terms of the role picks.
How is he not? It's interesting because I've heard him talk about the fact that like he wanted to be Leo, but then he realized that wasn't really exactly what he wanted or exactly what was available to him. But there is some Leo in there, in the mix, for sure.
There absolutely is, but Leo would never go on College Game Day. He wouldn't do that. So he wouldn't go on Theo Von's podcast and hang out and talk about Bernie Sanders. I mean,
he wouldn't talk to Brittany Broski and like know all the inside jokes.
Yes,
stuff
exactly.
Like
that is
he might date a Kardashian. But you know.
Yes. But even that is like Leo hasn't had a very famous girlfriend in a long time. Maybe younger Leo, the same way Chalamet is young.
He prefers to be the star of that relationship. Yeah, that's interesting. And I think what goes along with all of it, genuine talent, obviously, that's in the mix. That's in the mix for plenty of people, but is in the mix for him. But then also the narrative around A Complete Unknown, the amount of sweat equity that went into that project, the musical training, the footage of him, rehearsing on the set of Dune. Nothing, I think, can match watching him rehearse to be Bob Dylan while dressed as Paul Atreides. That's just undeniable.
It's pretty cool. It's just really a huge relief to actually have someone like this who I'm like, wow, I definitely will be thinking about this guy in 20 years. Like there's just, unless he's felled by some terrible scandal, I think he's here to stay.
Clip this and save it for the future. Okay. But let's hope we don't have to use it.
How many things can you clip from me at this point? How many times can I be dragged through the mud for my bad takes? Joanna, please don't draw attention to those things.
I'm not the one dragging you.
You had another great idea for a winner of the year, which is a genre winner. And it's pretty clearly musicals, right? This seems to be, in the absence of huge action franchises, in the absence of studio comedies, in the absence of romance movies, musicals, when you look down the list, obviously Wicked springs to mind immediately. But let's not forget that we've got 3 potentially big musician biopics. Of course, One Love, the Bob Marley movie, which did come out at the beginning of this year and was a big hit, especially when you look at the list of movies that came out and the box office returns. Like it did quite well. And then a Complete Unknown, which we were just discussing. And I just had a chance to see Better Man last night, the Robbie Williams movie, which I don't know if it's going to do business, but it is certainly a unique thing. You liked it?
I liked it. Did you like it?
Parts of it. Obviously, anybody who doesn't know, Robbie Williams is a huge British pop star, was a member of the group Take That, and tried to break through in America in the 2000s. It didn't quite take, but he remained a massive star in the UK. This new biopic, which is directed by Michael Gracie, who made The Greatest Showman, features your kind of standard issue musician biopic story, except that Robbie Williams is portrayed by a CGI monkey, which is a very thinly veiled, not even a metaphor. It's a literalization of the fact that all entertainers are like dancing monkeys.
Yeah.
And half of it is very stupid and boring, and half of it is exhilarating. So kind of like The Greatest Showman.
Yeah. I would say this is better, I think, than The Greatest Showman was for me personally, for my taste. Is it cinema? Is it wonderful? No, but as a piece of pop art, I really enjoyed it.
The Take That sequence when they burst out of the store and dance in the street, I was like, this rocks. This is so fun.
It was so good. You've listed all these films. There's also Emilia Perez. We would
I completely
count,
forgot about
obviously.
Emilia Perez.
Yeah,
And Moana 2 and Mean
Mhm.
Girls, which also did very well this year, the
Yeah.
musical remake of Mean Girls.
Mhm.
Yeah, it seems like musicals are doing well. What's your alt for this?
The only alt I could come up with,
This is a good one.
and it's an unserious one, is in the vein of Better Man, Digital Monkeys. Better Man, Wicked, The Flying Monkeys of Wicked, The Strange Abominations in Gladiator 2, Mufasa's Got Plenty, and there was a
Rafiki. Yeah.
and there was a Planet of the Apes movie this year, lest we forget. So Digital Monkeys.
It's a great pick. It's honestly legitimate. This is the one part of Wicked 2, Wicked that we'll have to fast forward through in my house, by the way. The monkeys
I know.
is going to be a lot.
Someone was asking me if they could take their kid, like a small kid, to Wicked. I was like, those monkeys they startled me.
Yeah, me too. It's actually quite upsetting.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that there's another nice confirmation that is on the back of the Chalamet thing, which is that Zendaya now, I think similarly as a movie figure, is not just Mary Jane anymore between Challengers, which you mentioned earlier, and the success that movie had. And then the fact that Chani was so central to Dune Part 2, which was not promised necessarily, I guess, if you've read the novel, the fact that Villeneuve made that decision, that great bit of press when Spielberg interviewed Villeneuve and said, like, out of all the people in your cast, who do you think will be directing movies in 20 years? And he was like, oh, easily Zendaya, easily.
She was
the one who was
set with her camera and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it was great. And I think that, especially after like the hue and cry after the first installment, when she's sort of barely in it, having her as the and then like just storytelling wise, having her as the POV-ish character was a massive adaptation improvement, I think, actually, on a novel that I love. Zendaya, it's funny because when I was looking at your power couple category, I was really trying to convince myself that I could put Zendaya and Tom Holland in there, and I simply can't, because Tom Holland has not yet been anything other than Peter Parker or, Zendaya's biggest hype guy. And so as much as I like love and support them, I can't call them, the power couple that one might call Ryan Reynolds and Deadpool. But Zendaya as a minted movie star, especially off the back of Challengers, a non-franchise real powerhouse turn, I think is exciting.
Yeah.
Really,
and
really
the good
exciting.
news is that she gets to now make Euphoria for the next 18 months.
And I mean, one can only hope The Greatest Showman 2.
I have heard a little bit about the film that she's making with Robert Pattinson for A24 with Chris Borgley, who made Dream Scenario. That movie sounds really good. I'm not at liberty to share too much about it, but what I heard about it sounded great. So I'm excited about that.
Wow, what a tease.
I think it's called The Drama. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. Okay. My riser of the year obviously was Glenn, because Glenn got bumped from movie star of the year, sadly. But he's our riser. Who's your alt for riser?
Friend of the pod. I was looking at it and I was I think the Glenn story is undeniable, but Kaylee Spaney being in both Alien Romulus, though not the best part of Alien Romulus, and Civil War, I think is a worthy narrative. I mean, she was already sort of on the rise because of Priscilla and all of that, but I think this is a really good year for her. Again, in terms of like, she's in a franchise film and a film from a filmmaker that we both find very exciting at the same time. And so that was, I think, it's a strong year for her. And then I think Margaret Qualley, even though she was very much in the conversation, there's something about the way that people have reacted to The Substance that I think has locked her into a level of celebrity. She, even as like Andie MacDowell's kid, or after a really good performance in Maid, or having a celebrity relationship, or this, that, and the other thing, being in a Tarantino film, I think this really pushed her into a different level.
I think that's a great call. I hadn't thought of that, but it does feel like she got famous, for lack of a better phrase, this year. So that's a good pick too. Indie story of the year to me is an absolute no-brainer. It's Damien Leone and Terrifier 3. And the fact that movie opened at #1 in America and has made an extraordinary amount of money relative to the investment. And the fact that Damien has been working on this project for over 10 years, and Cineverse, doubled down on expanding the movie onto thousands of screens. And honestly, has got people in studio horror shook because now that movie feels like a real pivot point, a real hinge moment now where everyone's looking for their Terrifier 3. And the truth is it's not replicable, but it's got executives and producers looking all over the place for potential talents in a way that is so good for horror and that horror desperately needs. So
yeah,
for me, it's exciting. Terrifier 3 I thought was okay. I think Terrifier 2 is the superior of those movies. Not that it really matters.
Of the Terrifiers?
Yeah.
Okay.
But its success is very, very exciting. What's your alt?
Well, what else would you put under the indie horror umbrella this year?
I think In a Violent Nature and Late Night with the Devil, which were both IFC Shudder films, both had theatrical runs that did significantly better than I ever would have expected. Late Night with the Devil, especially kind of minting David Desmalchin as like a proper leading man. It was very cool.
Exciting.
And then Long Legs, obviously, I mean, there's very rarely been anything like that from a kind of a micro major like Neon to drive that much interest in a movie that I think actually ultimately most people were kind of mixed on, but that they just marketed the fuck out of it and it did so well. I liked it. So, up and down year for horror in general. The major studios, I think, did not have a good year for horror, but I also think they'll be back next year too.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have an alt here, but I need your feedback on this because, I thought maybe Sundance as a whole, and the only reason obviously Sundance often lingers across the year, but I feel like in recent years it's felt like diminishing. Its power has been diminishing. And I just know that in the conversations you and I have had over the past couple weeks, I felt like I kept hearing you say, and obviously that was a movie at Sundance earlier this year. I felt like I heard that more than I usually do, and I couldn't tell if that was just my imagination, but some titles, A Real Pain, Different Man, My Old Ass, Dee Dee, Will and Harper, I Saw the TV Glow, Kneecap, Between the Temples. Like, that seems to me, and especially as we're in the middle of an awards conversation, and A Real Pain is here, and Dee Dee is still, like, hanging around, Different Man is hanging around, I Saw the TV Glow is sort of burbling around a bit in some award circles, and Will and Harper just got shortlisted in the docs. Like, it just seems like a more impactful Sundance year than usual. So.
I think there's actually a whole slate of documentaries too. I mean, most of the documentaries that are on the short list premiered at Sundance. I think over half of them, including Sugarcane was there, Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat was there, a number of other films, like we're all really good films. I've done Sundance virtually the last 2 years, and I'm doing it again this year virtually. And it's candidly better for me because I feel like I need to see roughly 30 movies so that I can be prepared for what you're describing. But I think it's a great insight because the studios did not have the ability to either be in production or do the reshoots that they needed to do during the strikes. So there were tons of empty weekends over the years. And that created opportunity for movies like the ones you just listed to have a little bit more breathing room to get into the conversation this year. And you're right. They made the most of it for the most part. None of these movies did really as well commercially as you would want. Even a movie like A Real Pain, which I think 10 or 20 years ago would have been playing at the Angelica for like 3 months.
Totally.
Is not quite doing that, but they are in the conversation for sure.
Right. Like Kieran Culkin's about to win an Oscar for it, right? And I saw the TV Glow keeps coming up as like your favorite filmmaker's favorite filmmaker. You know what I mean? Like a lot of filmmakers are talking about I Saw the TV Glow as something that felt really impactful to them this year.
So that movie to me is the one that probably will be the most influential on people who are in their early 20s who will go out and make movies. Because what Jane did in that film, the hallmarks are so obvious for what they were after, but there had never really been that kind of synthesis before. And so I expect that movie to be a big calling card if I'm interviewing directors in 10 years who are 30 years younger than me. They'll be citing something like that. Hopefully. That's a wonderful movie. So I see that as a good thing. Okay, comeback of the year. To me, this was an easy one. I like your alt as well. But Demi Moore in The Substance and the fact that she has not headlined a studio movie in almost 20 years and delivers, I think, a brilliant and deeply committed performance and did it in an incredibly strange movie. There's not, even though Demi Moore is known for taking chances, there's not a lot in her career that suggests she would be a part of a movie like this. So I was blown away.
Charlie's Angels 2?
No. But even movies like G.I. Jane or Striptease where she like kind of transformed herself. never anything this kind of genre bound. So I think it's really cool and great, and it's been great to see her through the award circuit the last few months.
And I think also, I mean, I don't want to like throw a parade for the beautiful people of the world when they decide to get unglamorous for a role, because like, okay, listen, great, good for you, but like her brand has and her personal brand has been so tied up in her beauty for so long that there's something incredibly profound and sticky about what she did with the substance. And I remember that, I know you do too, just the conversations about it coming out of Cannes. And it was like, sometimes these conversations happen. It was at Cannes, right? It was not Venice, it was Cannes. Anyway, like, yeah, it was Cannes. Some of these festival conversations, you hear it from afar and you're like, that's everyone just trying to make a story or and this one sounded so improbable that I was like, all right, my pals at Vanity Fair or whatever it is, like, I don't believe that this is going to be what you're saying it's going to be. And then lo and behold, it absolutely was. And actually even more than I think a lot of people even in the various profiles on Demi that was coming out of the festivals, this was just even bigger than that. My alt is Adrian Brody as a bona fide leading man. And this is for you, my favorite Brutalist fan. Because I was talking to someone about the Brutalist, and I was like, yeah, and Adrian Brody's like really, really good in it. I'm not as high on the movie as you are, Sean, but I was like, Adrian Brody's really, really good in it. And in, 95% of the movie. And she was like, well, when has he ever not been good? I was like, I don't have an argument for you about that, but I will just say that, yes, we get excited when he shows up in Succession, or yes, he's been a great part of the Wes Anderson players, but he won the Best Actor Oscar, and then his career as a leading man did not really continue from there the way that we thought it would, with Love and Respect to King Kong. And so the fact that he did this, is so good in it, will, I hope, encourage people to cast him as like the real leading man that he definitely can be. He's so captivating in The Brutalist, and something that Brady Corbet and his lens knew how to do was just like, they were just shot, like just the way his like body was just sort of like arced around in this. It was like its own piece of architecture in this movie. It was just like a really, really, this is a star. Remember, he won an Oscar for a reason sort of moment for him. So yeah.
I think one of the reasons why he resonated so deeply in the early 2000s is because he reminded a lot of Academy voters in The Pianist of a certain kind of 70s star, of a Pacino, a Cazale, a Gene Hackman, a sort like beautiful in his own way, but unconventionally appealing. And his choices as a leading man in The Aftermath, I always thought were pretty interesting. He made The Village, he made The Jacket, he made King Kong, he made The Darjeeling Limited, The Brothers Bloom, and Cadillac Records. That was his run. And
I love those. I love
a lot of those movies are really interesting. Unfortunately for him, they're all like the 5th or 6th best movie from a lot of good filmmakers.
Yeah.
So he kind of got some bad luck in there too. It's like he got the one Rian Johnson movie that didn't totally hit. He got the 5th best M. Night Shyamalan movie. Like it just didn't really totally happen. And I mean, of course, I agree. I think obviously the movie rests on his shoulders in The Brutalist. We are with him almost the entire film. And it's hard to look away from him. I've always liked him as an actor, and it is a good story. It's a good story. It's so interesting to me that he is competing against Chalamet in Best Actor, because he once upon a time was Chalamet. Maybe not as much of a heartthrob, or didn't have quite the CV that Chalamet has at this point, but he was the youngest ever winner, and if Chalamet wins this year, he will be the youngest ever winner for Best Actor. So it's an interesting race, and it's a great, great pick. Let's try to do the losers as quickly as we can.
Please.
I know that you just recorded an episode of The House of Midnight about Kraven, and Kraven ends now, I believe, this experiment in Sony's Spider-Man extended universe, even though we'll still get the next animated Spider-Verse movie and
Spider-Man Noir.
And Spider-Man Noir, the Amazon series, which I guess Nick Cage is going to star in.
Live action, Nick Cage, Spider-Man Noir.
Cool.
A lot of questions.
That's interesting. And we'll get another Tom Holland appearance in a Spider-Man movie. I think, is it Destin Daniel Cretton is making that, right? But this world, isn't there going to be a Venom 4 too? I mean, Venom just made like $400 million.
I don't know how exaggerated the reported death of this universe is, but this year we had Kraven the Hunter, Venom 3, and Madam Web. 3 of my worst times at the movie theater, personally.
Kraven really stinks, Joe.
It's real bad.
Yeah.
And Madam Web is perhaps even worse. And I would say Dr. Michael Morbius is perhaps even worse than all of those combined. And so Venom 3, I had a good time because we were all together. That was like fun. But I did feel like a moment of sanity with you when like some of our pals were like, that was so fun. I had a great time. And you were like laughing and you were like, yeah, that was a disaster. And I agree with you. I think that film is a disaster.
It's pretty bad.
Narratively a disaster.
And so you know me, I love to love a Venom movie.
I know you do. I think this might be a pause more than an obituary moment, but a pause they really need to take and figure it out.
Well, I don't think it necessarily signals too much about the comic book movie industrial complex. We're obviously going to keep getting those. We spent some time talking about Superman. We're talking about Downey and Evans coming back. I do think that I wanted to make an observation.
Please.
You've been covering a lot of these shows, mostly on House of R, sometimes on Prestige, but I didn't watch a ton of new shows this year that in theory are right in my sweet spot. I didn't really watch Agatha. I watched a couple of episodes and gave up on it. I only watched 2 episodes of The Acolyte. I watched 1 episode of Dune Prophecy. I haven't watched Creature Commandos. Like, there's a couple more that were like bigger. What are some other big franchise TV titles that came out?
House of the Dragon.
I did watch House of the Dragon. I did not watch Rings of Power.
Skeleton Crew.
I did not watch Skeleton Crew.
Now. Yeah.
You know, these are all things that are deeply important to my childhood and that in the movies I have kept up with very closely.
Yeah.
And I used to do this for the TV shows when the streaming boom happened. And I just don't have the energy, time, or interest at all for this stuff anymore. And I think what it means is a retrenchment into the movies because I think a lot of these studios and streamers understand that like TV is not necessarily the best place for all of these things. Some of them it is. Oh, The Penguin is another one, which in theory, I think I would like even.
I think you will like The Penguin.
Yeah, but like for whatever reason, I never was compelled. Maybe I will now that I have some time over the break to watch it. But it's so interesting to me that with the exception probably of The Penguin, that all of those other properties are like either critically a little middling or audience-wise were a little middling or some combination of both. You know, I know you had a lot of affection for Agatha, but I wouldn't say it was like a breakout smash.
That was more personal affection. I'm clear-eyed enough to say that was personal affection. And though it was, I think, a bigger hit than a lot of people thought it was going to be, I'm not saying it was like, it didn't do what WandaVision did. Like sort of cross outside of the Marvel faithful or anything like that. I think that it was a tough year in terms of like Acolyte was tough. I think Dune Prophecy is rough. That sort of stuff. I really liked Rings of Power personally. And Rings of Power is a sneakily hugely popular show. A show that I skipped that people love is Fallout.
Yeah.
And I need to catch up on it, but that was a massive hit.
I think that's their biggest show ever, right? Amazon?
Yeah, massive hit. And then next year we're gonna have stuff like The Last of Us season 2. There's gonna be a Game of Thrones universe show, Night of the Seven Kingdoms, that I actually think has the possibility of being better than possibly better than House of the Dragon. We'll see. Just because of the source material. I think that, you know, like Severance. If you were asking more about franchise more than genre, but I think what everyone is doing is retrenching and just sort of trying to figure things out. And so like for Marvel television, for example, like you're going to watch Daredevil. Like that's
Am I?
You are.
I'm getting old.
No. You are not that old, Sean. But also what's true is that while Marvel has definitely tarnished their own brand by putting out very middling to bad TV shows, like Secret Invasion, one of the worst things I've ever seen, right? And so you're like, how can I trust again? How can I love again?
That is how I feel.
You burnt me so badly.
I was the guy yelling on the Movie Bro podcast about how Endgame is a meaningful work of art. You know, like I was one of those people.
And it is. And I think Daredevil is going to be genuinely great. I genuinely do. I really do. I'm not just saying that so that people will listen to House of R. I think they have pressed pause, retrenched this year, and are really trying to make sure, because I actually think the most critical time, Lucasfilm is a mess right now. So I don't even want to talk about how we can fix Star Wars because I actually don't know. But in terms of Marvel, next year is going to be so pivotal for them, because if they do Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four and Daredevil and land all of those with the breathing room that Deadpool and Wolverine gave them financially, then you can't say that Marvel's in trouble anymore, right?
I noticed you
If
did
they
not
land
include
those-
Captain America 4 in that.
We don't need to talk about we don't need to talk about
We need
the
to
Red
talk
Hulk
about Red
at
Hulk.
all. We don't need to talk about the Red Hulk at all.
Should I do
But you
a
know what I mean?
solo video about Red Hulk, breaking it down when the film comes out?
Yeah. Yes.
Just into camera.
Yeah. in
Why
your
Red Hulk?
Yeah.
How Red Hulk taught me to be weird.
Get the teleprompter out and just really do it for the real sickos out there. Okay. What else do you want to talk about on the losers list?
I mean, Apple had a bad year. You know, they did have a lot of TV shows that I think people liked, and I think a lot of those shows are actually underseen relative to the quality. And I really admire the swings that they take on the TV side and being able to grow shows like Silo, which is not a show I watch, but the handful of episodes I watched, I was like, okay, this is kind of like hard sci-fi and well made, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that they're making stuff like Bad Monkey, and I didn't get Sugar at all, but I think it's cool that they tried. That's all on the TV side. On the movie side, they're a mess. It was just a mess of a year. It's Argyle, Fly Me to the Moon, and Wolves. That's not good.
3 of the biggest sort of like punchline movies of the year, unfortunately. So
I think Fly Me to the Moon is not an embarrassing movie by any means. It's just a perfectly fine movie that got rolled out in the middle of July.
It's a perfectly fine movie with like 2 genuine movie stars in it who should together have produced something a bit splashier than that. I remember when you guys recorded your Wolves episode and you were essentially like angry. Not just what are we doing here, but like, why are we wasting talented people's time with this? That was real tough.
It's true,
and then
though.
Argyle is one of the most baffling things I've ever encountered. So
It's a fiasco. Yeah. I mean, Apple Original Films, let's see what they have. I mean, I know for a fact that they have The Gorge coming early next year, which is the new film from Scott Derrickson starring Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy. Let's see what else they have cooking up in 2025, because they do need a bit of a bounce back. Oh, F1, of course, which is, in theory, a very big deal, the Brad Pitt film, but we shall see. Yeah. Beyond that, there's a few things that have been announced. The thing that they have going that I'm most interested in is the studio, the Seth Rogen series.
I am very curious. I have been told, at least on the TV front, that again, we're in a bit of a retrench because Apple was just throwing anything at the wall, right? Was throwing buckets of money at anyone who will take it to make a TV show. And the tap is drying up a bit there. But it is wild because there will be all these shows on Apple TV that have incredibly famous people in them and nobody knows they exist. And that is a wild thing that Apple has done in an understandable effort to catch people's attention, but they just don't know how to market their own material for the most part. It's baffling.
It feels that way. Let's do one more loser. And I think it's an interesting discussion point, which is the Legacy sequel.
Yeah.
Now, we've got a bunch of these.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about this, and I want to just talk to you about it.
Well, okay, so you've made the list of Legacy sequels from this year. Twisters, obviously, which is more or less a shadow remake of the original Twister.
Correct.
Beetlejuice. Furiosa. And Bad Boys Ride or Die, which is, I think, a debatable Legacy sequel. I think the third film was probably more of a Legacy sequel than this one, but we're in that lineage.
It's the same with Furiosa. Like those are sort of like
9 years is a good gap.
Yeah. And then and Gladiator 2, of course.
And Gladiator 2.
Write down, but yeah.
It's tough because I would say, with the exception of Furiosa, all of these movies were financially successful. Gladiator 2 is kind of chug its way, I think, to profitability over the holidays. And so Twisters, Beetlejuice, Bad Boys Ride or Die, and Gladiator 2 made good money.
Mm-hmm.
I think all of these movies are disappointing creatively, with the exception of Furiosa, which you and I are both like, it's good. We agree it's good. We're not going to fight with anybody about it. I know people disagree with us. That's okay. There's nothing negative really to say about the movie, but it wildly underperformed at the box office. So
I think we weren't we like, I think good is higher than we landed. I think we said like mixed, like that there were parts of it that were really, really good.
I
and
said
then
this week on the
parts-
show, it's a 7 out of 10 for me. That's like, I can't,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it's good.
Yeah.
That's not a bad movie by any stretch, but it is a movie that I thought was flawed. Nevertheless, like all of these movies, they're all kind of different, you know, like Beetlejuice. I got kind of hyped up on at CinemaCon, and the hype was right, which is that it was going to be a big hit, and it was a big hit. But I thought it was a pretty mediocre movie. Even though I was glad to see Tim Burton back with practical effects and in that world and kind of being Weird Tim. The script is real bad. And
I would just say not like this, Tim.
Yeah.
I've also been asking for that, but not like this, Tim.
Yeah. And Twisters, I think, is a lot of fun and a good blockbuster, but deeply iterative, you know?
I just don't want to fill in for Amanda and speak ill of Twisters, but I did not have a good time with this movie.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I've heard some people say the same. I think Amanda and I had a lot of fun with it, but it's not.
I really wanted to. It was like, I was really excited for this movie. Really, really excited for it. I was like a true believer. Love Daisy, love Glenn. I think it was similar to what we were saying about Gladiator 2, and you just said iterative. Like it upset me that a filmmaker that I admire so much, in Lee Isaac Chung, was just like uninterested in making something that didn't feel like beat for beat in a way.
Mhm.
I was disappointed by that, even more so than I would be in Ridley Scott, because Ridley is so up and down over the years. Who's to say? But like,
Yeah.
I was excited for this, this exciting, innovative filmmaker gets a franchise that it was a massive blockbuster in the 90s that we loved and put really interesting people in it. And I was like, this is going to be amazing. And then I just thought it was aggressively fine, at the end of the day.
Yeah. I hear that, and I've heard many other people say it. I don't know if you can call the Legacy sequel a loser. It's more of like a hold. These movies made enough money that it means there's going to be a lot more of them over the next 10 years. But I'm not sure that I look forward to them.
Nobody Fury roaded it this year is the thing. No one took a property and did something really exciting with it this year. And I would put Alien Romulus in here too, though you can't really call that a Legacy sequel, but like that was one that has some really exciting sequences to it, and then some baffling choices as well.
It is kind of a legacy tweener, right? Because I think it happens between 1 and 2. Isn't that the timeline? Another movie that I feel very similarly about Romulus as I do to Twisters, which is like in the theater, had a great time. The more I thought about it, the more I felt I could pick it apart. But the in theaters, and I probably won't watch it again. Whereas I usuly like to rewatch movies I really, really enjoy a second time in this same calendar year, and I won't be doing that for either of those. But I think you're right. I think that's a good call. Should we any other losers you want to hit? Should we pivot out of losers?
I think we've enough with the negativity. Let's give people the highest honor that Hollywood has to offer, shall we? We're giving out Oscars on this podcast.
What honor
Did
is
you know
that?
Yeah. Did you know that we're awarding Best Picture right now?
Best Picture. Me and you and Katie Rich did this, right? Did we do the last one? We did.
Yeah.
And we did. This was the top 10 Best Picture power rankings. The Substance, Sing Sing, Blitz, A Real Pain, Dune Part 2, Wicked Part 1, Emilia Perez, The Brutalist, Conclave, and Anora. I don't think this has changed a lot, but it has changed a little. What do you think?
I don't think we should be embarrassed by it, which is good news.
Agreed.
I think it's 80% right in the films that should be on here.
Me as well.
And, and then we just need to shuffle the order a bit.
Do you think anything has unseated Anora at number 1?
No.
There's not a case for Wicked here?
I mean, that would flatter my ego, since I'm the one who argued Wicked onto the list last time, and your Big Pick listeners were like, she's wrong.
Well, you were right. You were 100% right at that time.
I would definitely put it way higher than it is currently, but I don't know that I would put it as the front runner, mostly because of the John Chu situation.
Just meaning that you don't think he'll be recognized, so it's unlikely that it's going to win.
Yeah, there's also the screenplay question. Do you think it's getting nominated for screenplay? Because if it's not getting nominated for screenplay, I think it's been like over 20 years since we've had a Best Picture winner that didn't get nominated for screenplay.
I'll tell you what, if it gets nominated for screenplay, you can watch me put it at number 1 in January.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think it's as strong as number 1. I
think it's like 2 or 3, maybe 3, but I don't think it's 1 yet. But I think it could definitely get there.
The box office being a little soft internationally is interesting to me. It's done very well. It's obviously not done super well with the critics groups. Most of the critics groups, with the exception of NBR, are not really recognizing it. It did very well with Critics' Choice Awards.
My voting body, yeah.
It's probably going to do well with SAG.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's probably it, right?
Globes.
And Globes,
it's on,
course, right?
It's on the AFI list, and the AFI list is the strongest predictor we currently have in the awards conversation.
I mean, it's definitely getting nominated for Best Picture. To me, it's more about the strength,
like where,
and the totality. Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I think 3 is a good place to put it. What comes in at number 2 behind Anora is a good conversation for us to have, though. So let's do Wicked at 3 and Anora at 1.
Yeah,
I think that's about right. Now, tell me what you think should be cut. And let's see if we agree.
Oh, with love and respect to Katie Rich, it's Blitz and the Substance.
I'll definitely give you Blitz. Blitz, I think, is gone.
Blitz is definitely gone. Substance, I'm willing to have a conversation about, but Blitz is definitely gone.
What do you think is going in where Blitz was?
A Complete Unknown, which hadn't come out yet when we made this list, so wasn't in the conversation. And
I would suggest that a complete Unknown is currently at number 9.
Yeah, maybe higher. Just because of it's such a traditional. I know we're talking about the new Academy and not the old Academy, but it is such a traditional Best Picture winner type of thing. And B, Timmy being like leaping to the front of the Best Actor race, I think is really pushing it up the list.
The challenge for it is possible it only has 2 nominations.
For Timmy and for
Picture.
Norton? Oh, for Picture.
Now, Norton could get in, obviously.
Norton could get in.
But I don't think it has a chance at any below the line.
No.
I mean, it's been shortlisted for sound. Musicals usually do well there.
Yeah.
But it's also competing against Emilia Perez and Wicked in that respect. Plus, you've got kind of bigger tent movies like Dune Part 2. You got Joker Folie à Deux competing there as well. Another musical like.
Okay, yeah. Let's leave it at 9. But I feel like it's gonna go higher. But I'm happy to put it at 9 right now. That's fine. It's on the list.
The Substance. Let's table that for a minute. Is Conclave still at 2? Conclave has not been the streaming icon that I thought it was going to be.
Well, I think it's either Conclave or The Brutalist.
I don't think The Brutalist is as strong at the moment. I think The Brutalist is still. I will say, I just scoped out the Vista screenings. It starts screening tonight, Thursday night, and I think has like a 2 or 3 week run in 70 at the Vista here in Los Angeles. And many of those screenings are already sold out, which is very exciting. Yeah. Obviously, that's a honey trap for the boys. You know, there's gonna be a lot of the boys are showing out. And the girls, of course. So the boys is a non-gender associated phrase.
I was sure that you meant it in a non-gendered sense. Do you think it's going to be the intermission that breaks them, or
no? Nothing will break anyone. We're thriving. I think they can only really run it twice a day because it's 3 hours and 40 minutes of hang time. Yeah. But I just don't. It's missed in a couple spots. You know, like at the Spirits, like it almost blanked. I think it only got 1 nomination at the Spirit Awards, which is just weird because it's the definition of an independent film. Like it was financed by a multiple number of organizations over a number of years and scooped up by A24. And that group was just like, no, which is so interesting. So, you know, it's divisive.
It's divisive, but isn't it like, especially as we talk about the international voting body at the Academy, isn't it the sort of exactly, we've been talking about this. Like, what statement do we send when we call The Brutalist the best picture of the year? We send a statement of art is the most important thing. Capitalism is crushing art. America is a disease is sort of some of the big takeaways. Of
I got news
Brutalist,
for
right?
you. We don't do that anymore.
Okay.
That's not what Coda is. That's not what Everything Everywhere All at Once is. That's not even what Oppenheimer is.
It's a bit what Oppenheimer is.
Oppenheimer is like, look at all these movie stars. Look at this master craftsman who made superhero movies who we didn't recognize when he was working in genre. You know, like, is it really the core messaging of Oppenheimer that got it Best Picture? Or is it the craft and the scale?
I think it's the story of a capital G great, capital M man. And I mean that kind of in an ungendered sense. This great figure sort of story, and I kind of see that the Brutalist stands in for that.
That's a fair point. That's you're right in that respect. I do think that they get to that place in different ways.
As our most cherished and most brutal of boys, where would you put the Brutalist on the list?
God, if I could just have that on like a nameplate outside.
The most brutal of boys.
The most brutal of boys right here on a copper nameplate. And I could record in that fashion for the rest of my life. I'd be so excited. I think it's at 4. And I think it's in a kind of a battle with Emilia Perez in the sort of divisive
so we're putting
knife fight.
We're putting Conclave at 2 then?
I think Conclave at 2 and then maybe Brutalist at 4 and Emilia Perez at... Emilia Perez might be even stronger than that. I don't know if you saw the short list, but like showing up 6 times on the short list is a big deal.
Yeah.
That movie's going to get 11 Oscar nominations.
Though, wasn't 2 of them were for song, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, the short list was quite telling. I think Conclave people keep bringing up as this sort of like, in terms of second place here, second place in a lot of people's the consensus second place on the ranked ballot in that, you know what I mean? That it could, that it's going to be mid high on everyone's ballot, and that could just push it higher than than if we did do ranked voting. What else what do you want to put next?
We've got 4 slots left now. 10, 8, 7, and 6.
I think Sing Sing is way higher than it used to be, especially as we're talking about Clarence and Coleman and screenplay all in conversation.
I think you're right. I think Sing Sing is at 6. We'll see what that January reissue does for it, but news of the Academy screenings has been very warm.
Mm-hmm. We know that I'm in the tank for Sing Sing, but I feel like I'm being clear-eyed here.
Did you see that the Sing Sing account used your commentary to bolster our commentary? Yeah,
our commentary. Yeah. Well, yes, I did see that.
So great to make marketing materials with you as always, Joanna.
I love to do unpaid promo.
It's my whole fucking life
for
at
the
this point.
Studios.
Gosh, so that leaves us with potential contenders. I'll give you all the contenders right now. Last time around, The Substance, Blitz, and A Real Pain and Dune Part 2 filled out our list. I believe Dune 2 is still competing. I believe A Real Pain is still competing.
Mm-hmm.
I have my doubts about The Substance. I'm a little iffy on A Real Pain at this point. Just a little bit.
Well, that's why I think it should go. I think that's why you need to bump A Complete Unknown up and put A Real Pain lower on the list.
Oh, okay. So you think A Complete Unknown is at 8, A Real Pain is at 9,
yeah,
and then we have to figure out what 10 is?
Yes. And Dune Part 2 at 7.
And you would put Dune Part 2 at 7. I think that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Dune Part 2 is a little bit shaky as well right now, Joanna.
Yes.
Denis, I don't think is getting into director at the moment.
I agree with you.
That's fucked up.
It is fucked up, but I guess we're all just believing the narrative that we're saving it for Dune Messiah. Just keep your powder dry for Dune Messiah, I guess, is what's happening.
Just really sucks. Okay, so let's talk about number 10, the coveted number 10 slot. This is very challenging. There's quite a few films that could make it here. We had The Substance last time, but also contending, I suppose, Gladiator 2, September 5, Nickel Boys, The Room Next Door, The Wild Robot, The Seed of the Sacred Fig, All We Imagine as Light, Challengers, and Nosferatu.
Yeah.
Now, as an elegant throw to my conversation with Ramel Ross, I will make the case for Nickel Boys.
No, you don't have to make the case. I was gonna agree with you, and I was not intending to pander to your guest, but I genuinely think it's Nickel Boys. But make the case.
It is a movie that I think for folks who work in craft and in writing will be incredibly impressed by the decisions that are made. I think Ramel has a chance in director. because of the decisions he's made. That being said, for the body at large, I think it's going to be a very challenging watch. I moderated a conversation with Ramel and Ingenue Ellis-Taylor over the weekend at the Aero Theater in Santa Monica, and people were locked in. I will also say Ingenue and Ramel are great advocates for the movie. So smart, so charming. The Ramel interview is my favorite of the year. So I think on the strength of that, plus that this is the movie that MGM, Amazon is pushing hardest, I feel like it's going to get there. If you told me it was September 5 or you told me it was at Seat of the Sacred Fig, I wouldn't be shocked. But it feels like Nickel Boys to me right now.
But it's probably not going to be Challengers, and I just want to say it a couple times because people were so bummed that we didn't even talk about it last time, and I agree. I think Challengers belongs on this list. What I would bump for it, I couldn't tell you, but I do believe in terms of long-lasting impact, Challengers is a really important and wonderful film that came out this year. I think people have just forgotten, and I couldn't tell you why.
I think it's just a little too pop, to be candid. It seems a little too airy and light.
I think
I'm not calling it that. I think that's how people perceive it.
I feel like queer sort of split the focus. You know what I mean? Anyway. But I think that Nickel Boys, as the focus of the Amazon campaign, and as a formal an exercise in form, has really excited a lot of people. In terms of the big swings that Ramel took in the construction of the story. So I think people really want to reward it as an attempt at, and an attempt makes it sound unsuccessful, but what I just mean is we tried something. We really tried something with this movie, and has great performances in it. And I definitely think it's on the list.
Okay.
And this list, I don't want to be unimaginative, but this is the AFI list. But the AFI list is our best bellwether. So I'm not mad that we're in lockstep with it.
Many pundits, myself included, when I saw the AFI list, were this is it. This is Best Picture. And that's where I stand at the moment too, especially because now we've seen everything. There isn't anything I haven't seen that has been competing here. So let's run it down quickly and then we'll exit this chat, Joe. At number 10, Nickel Boys. At number 9, A Real Pain. At number 8, A Complete Unknown. At number 7, Dune Part 2. At number 6, Sing Sing. At number 5, Emilia Perez. At number 4, The Brutalist. At number 3, Wicked. At number 2, Conclave. And still holding at number 1. Can it go
until
the
Wicked
distance?
Until Wicked gets that screenplay nomination.
Nora is sitting at number 1. Until. Joanna, thank you. You're just the best.
Oh, you're just the best. Thanks for having me.
Thanks to Jack Sanders. And thanks to our producer, Bobby Wagner, for his work on today's episode. Next week, it is time for Bob Dylan. It's time for Timothée Chalamet. It's time for A Complete Unknown. Is it time for a meltdown from yours truly? Tune in and find out. We'll see you then.